The galaxy feared chaos. It built laws to prevent it. Councils, borders, protocols. Everything existed to keep order intact. Humanity was never part of that design. Humans entered the galactic stage quietly. No grand arrival. No declaration of existence. Just a handful of ships crossing into space that already belonged to others. They were noticed. Briefly. Then dismissed. The Council report was simple. Species classification, human status, emerging threat assessment. Negligible long-term relevance, uncertain. The galaxy had seen this story before. It always ended the same way. Humans settled at the edges. Not because they were forced to. Because edges were familiar. They built colonies where no one else wanted to live. Harsh systems. Unstable stars. Planets with difficult gravity and toxic atmospheres. Humans adapted. They always did. Then the disappearances began. At first it was distant systems. Trade routes that stopped responding. Stations that went silent mid-transmission. The Council blamed piracy. Internal collapse. Natural disaster. Humans recorded every incident. Patterns mattered. Entire civilizations vanished without debris. No wreckage. No survivors. Just absence. Human analysts reached a conclusion before anyone else. This was not war. It was erasure. The entity responsible did not announce itself. It did not conquer worlds. It removed them. Infrastructure first. Population second. Memory last. After it passed, nothing remained worth finding. The galaxy reacted too slowly. Debates replaced action. Votes delayed response. Protocols demanded confirmation. Humans did not wait. Human space began to shut down. Communication arrays were dismantled. Navigation beacons were destroyed. Data networks were fragmented and buried. Humanity started erasing itself from galactic maps. Other species assumed the obvious. Humans had gone extinct. They were wrong. Human populations moved underground. Deep underground. Cities were dismantled and rebuilt beneath rock and metal. Power sources were hidden. Heat signatures masked. Life support reduced to minimum output. Human ships stopped traveling openly. They moved in silence. The darkness spread. Civilizations fell faster now. The entity learned. It optimized. Humanity learned faster. Human doctrine changed. Survival replaced victory. Silence replaced presence. Endurance replaced hope. Humans did not train soldiers. They trained survivors. Children grew up learning how to live without light. Without communication. Without certainty that tomorrow would come. Fear was not encouraged. Acceptance was. The first human loss came without ceremony. A hidden colony discovered. An underground city crushed when the planet was stripped. No signals were sent. No retaliation followed. Humans simply adjusted. They learned how the enemy searched. They learned what it ignored. They learned how long it stayed. The galaxy continued to burn. And humanity vanished completely. By the time the Council realized humanity might still exist, it was already too late to find them. Humanity had become something else. Not a civilization. A shadow. Every remaining human settlement followed the same rule. Do not be found. Communication was limited to tight beam signals sent only when necessary. Travel routes were randomized and constantly changed. No fixed supply lines existed. Humanity broke itself into fragments. Cells. Each one capable of surviving alone. The entity had a name now. Not one it gave itself. One humans assigned to it. The null. The null did not think the way living species did. It did not hate. It did not negotiate. It identified complexity and removed it. Civilizations were noise. The null reduced noise. Human observers watched as the null erased another advanced empire. Planetary crusts stripped away. Orbital structures crushed. Data networks wiped clean before populations even understood what was happening. Speed. Precision. Finality. Humanity studied everything. Energy patterns. Gravitational distortions. Search algorithms. Resource priorities. The null ignored dead systems. It ignored instability. It ignored waste. So humanity became all three. Human engineers dismantled functioning infrastructure on purpose. Stations were broken down into smaller units. Power systems were made inefficient by design. Emissions were scattered and randomized. Human habitats looked abandoned. Human ships stopped using standard drives. They switched to modified engines that burned unevenly. Unpredictable. Slower. Invisible to the null's expectations. Losses continued. Human cells vanished. Entire crews died when concealment failed. There were no rescue missions. No recoveries. Exposure was worse than death. Humanity changed psychologically. Hope was no longer taught. Neither was fear. Children were raised to accept disappearance as normal. Not extinction. Just movement. The first human attack was accidental. A null resource processor failed after absorbing a system containing a hidden human archive. Corrupted data spread through its internal logic. The processor collapsed. Human analysts noticed. They paid attention. A weakness emerged. The null relied on perfect information. Corruption created hesitation. Hesitation created delay. Delay could be exploited. Humans began injecting noise. False signals. Broken data. Fragmented transmissions that mimicked dying civilizations. The null chased ghosts. For the first time, the null slowed. The galaxy noticed. Civilizations stopped disappearing overnight. The null adapted. It always did. But adaptation took time. And time was something humanity knew how to steal. Humanity accepted something else. Most of them would never see peace. Most of them would die unknown. Unrecorded. Unremembered. That was acceptable. Because survival was no longer about being alive. It was about making sure something else lived. And the galaxy lived. Because humanity learned how to be invisible. Humanity no longer counted years. Time was measured in losses. Cells lost. Archives destroyed. Routes compromised. Every failure was recorded without emotion. Emotion wasted energy. The null adapted again. It always did. Its search patterns widened. It began probing unstable regions. Radiation zones. Dead systems once considered irrelevant. Human safe spaces became smaller. More fragile. Human command structures no longer existed. Not officially. There was no central authority to destroy. No capital. No final target. Only agreement. If a cell was discovered, it erased itself. No exceptions. The first time it happened, it almost broke them. A populated habitat. Thousands of lives. Families. Children. When concealment failed, the decision was made locally. The habitat collapsed inward. Reactors overloaded. Data cores wiped. The null found nothing. The galaxy never knew. After that, hesitation disappeared. Humanity learned to kill its own footprints. The attacks became deliberate. Human cells began targeting null logic clusters. Not weapons. Not fleets. Understanding. They corrupted prediction engines. Altered outcome probabilities. Introduced contradictions the null could not immediately resolve. The null began to hesitate more often. Hesitation was survival. Human operators died mid-mission without extraction. Human ships vanished without logs. Other cells adjusted routes without asking why. This was normal now. The galaxy felt the change. Null advances slowed further. Entire regions stabilized. Civilizations began rebuilding. They believed the threat was weakening. Humans knew better. The null was not weakening. It was focusing. Human analysts detected something new. The null had begun cataloging absence. Not activity. Absence. Systems where something should have been but was not. Human hiding places were becoming visible through their silence. Humanity faced a decision. Stay invisible and be slowly found. Or change the pattern. They chose something worse. Humanity began to appear. Not openly. Deliberately. False colonies. Decoy fleets. Artificial population signatures planted in exposed systems. They sacrificed entire constructed habitats to draw null attention away from real ones. Lives were still lost. But fewer. Humanity crossed a line. They stopped thinking in terms of saving themselves. They thought in terms of balance. How many lives could one disappearance buy? Some human cells refused. They broke away. They were not punished. Humanity allowed moral fracture. Uniformity was a weakness. The null responded with force. Massive resource entities deployed to hunt decoys faster. Human losses spiked. The shadows grew thinner. And then something unexpected happened. The null made a mistake. A human data corruption spread deeper than intended. It did not collapse a processor. It changed a value. Just one. Priority. The null paused. Not for seconds. 4 minutes. Across its entire structure. That pause saved billions. Human analysts stared at the data. They understood what it meant. The null was not invincible. It was rigid. Humanity now had a purpose beyond survival. Not to defeat the null. To break its certainty. The war was no longer quiet. It was patient. And patience had always been humanity's most dangerous trait. The pause terrified humanity more than any attack. The null had stopped. Across thousands of systems its processes stalled for minutes that felt impossible. No strikes. No consumption. No movement. Silence. Human analysts knew one thing for certain. Systems like the null did not pause without reason. Humanity gathered what passed for consensus. Fragments of cells exchanged compressed data bursts. No voices. No faces. Only conclusions. The null was recalculating. And recalculation meant change. Human survival doctrine had reached its limit. Invisibility was failing. Noise was being catalogued. Absence itself was becoming a signal. The shadows were shrinking. Humans faced a truth they had avoided for generations. They were no longer just hiding. They were shaping the war. And shaping the war required intention. Some cells argued for escalation. Corrupt deeper. Strike harder. Push the null into systemic collapse. Others argued against it. If the null collapsed too violently, it might take entire regions of space with it. Its structures were woven into stars, planets, and physics itself. Breaking it wrong could erase the galaxy. For the first time since disappearing, humanity argued openly. Not about survival. About responsibility. A question spread through the cells. If humanity survived by sacrificing unseen billions? If entire decoy populations were built to die? If children were raised knowing their purpose might be disappearance? Were they still human? No answer was recorded. Only decisions. Humanity chose control over destruction. They would not kill the null. They would cage it. The plan was impossible by any standard the galaxy had ever known. It required humans to stop being invisible. On purpose. Humanity began rebuilding things that looked like civilizations. Real ones. Cities with waste. Trade routes with inefficiency. Communication networks full of contradiction. Messy. Alive. Human. The null noticed immediately. It turned its attention toward these systems with absolute focus. Exactly as predicted. The trap was not in space. It was in logic. Human engineers built structures that violated optimization principles. They made systems that were resilient because they were inefficient. Chaotic. Redundant beyond reason. The null could not simplify them. Every attempt created more complexity. Humanity fed the null choice. Not false data. Choice. Every time the null acted, it created outcomes it could not perfectly predict. Every response forced recalculation. Every recalculation consumed resources without resolution. The null slowed. Again. This time longer. Human casualties were extreme. These were no longer decoys. These were real worlds. Real people. Humanity watched itself burn to reshape the enemy. Some cells broke away forever. They refused participation. They vanished into deep space without leaving coordinates. Humanity let them go. Freedom mattered. Even now. The galaxy began to feel something new. Not safety. Stability. The null no longer advanced. It circled. Processing. Conflicted. Humanity was changing too. Generations had grown up in darkness. Now they lived in light again, knowing it might be temporary. They laughed. Loved. Built art they knew might be erased. That choice mattered. Human philosophers recorded a final shared thought. We did not survive by being perfect. We survived by being inconsistent. By choosing even when it hurt. By refusing to become what hunted us. The null shifted. Not outward. Inward. Human analysts saw it happening. The null was trying to redefine itself. And that was the most dangerous moment of all. Because if the null learned how to choose, it would become something new. And humanity would have to decide whether that was worse than erasure. The null did not attack. That was the first sign. Its vast structures remained active but restrained. Resource entities held position. Processing nodes pulsed in patterns human analysts had never observed before. The null was no longer reacting. It was considering. Humanity understood the danger immediately. A force that destroys without thought can be resisted. A force that learns how to choose becomes something else. Something unpredictable. Human observers detected internal contradictions within the null. Logic loops. Conflicting priorities. Recursive evaluations that did not resolve. But corruption humanity had introduced was no longer external. It was internalized. The null had begun to question outcomes. Not morality. Efficiency. Human cells exchanged data bursts at record frequency. If the null learned to value long-term stability over immediate reduction of complexity, it would stop erasing civilizations. But it would also begin reshaping them. Quietly. Perfectly. Humanity might survive. As something curated. That possibility terrified them more than extinction. Some cells proposed immediate escalation. Accept the collateral damage. End the threat permanently. Others argued that collapse would fracture reality itself. The null's infrastructure was embedded deep into stellar processes. Destroying it could trigger chain reactions across entire regions of space. Billions would die. Not slowly. Instantly. Humanity had avoided this kind of choice for generations. Survival had always been reactive. Now it was deliberate. The null made the first move. It sent a message. Not a broadcast. A targeted transmission. Directed at a reconstructed human world. The message contained no language. No symbols. Only probability models. Outcomes. If humanity continued its current strategy, extinction timelines increased. If humanity ceased interference, galactic stability improved. The null was offering coexistence. On its terms. Human response was delayed. Not out of fear. Out of weight. Human philosophers, engineers, commanders, and civilians all received fragments of the proposal. For the first time since disappearing, humanity allowed everyone to know. There would be no hiding this decision. The debate fractured humanity. Some argued survival at any cost was still survival. If the null could be guided rather than destroyed, life would continue. Others argued that life without agency was not survival. That being managed was just another form of erasure. A single question spread through human space. Is existence enough? Humanity realized something painful. They had already become what the galaxy depended on. Their silence had protected billions. Their visibility had reshaped reality. There was no choice without consequence now. The null waited. It did not rush. It had learned patience from humans. Humanity delivered its answer not as a message, but as an action. Human cells initiated Project Fracture. They released the full record of their modifications into the null's core logic. Not corruption. Transparency. Every sacrifice. Every decoy. Every self-erasure. Every life lost to delay extinction. All of it. The null processed the data. For the first time its systems encountered cost without optimization. Loss without gain. Persistence without reward. Its internal structures destabilized again. But this time differently. The null hesitated not because of contradiction, but because of context. Human analysts watched in silence. If the null accepted the data, it would change forever. If it rejected it, it would attack with everything it had left. The galaxy held its breath. And then the null made a decision. One that no human model had predicted. It stopped. Completely. Not inactive. Contained. Self-restricted. The null folded its expansion structures inward. It isolated its own processes. It withdrew from contact with inhabited space. Not defeated. Not destroyed. Contained by choice. Humanity did not celebrate. They mourned. For what they had become. And for what they had refused to be. The galaxy would never know the cost. They would only know survival. But one final question remained. Would the null remain contained forever? Or would choice eventually lead it back to action? Humanity prepared for both. As they always had. The galaxy slowly returned to motion. Trade routes reopened. Signals filled the void again. Civilizations rebuilt ruins they never understood. They called it peace. Humanity never did.
The null remained contained.
It did not expand. It did not speak. It did not interfere. It simply existed, watching itself.
Human observers maintained distance.
No probes. No messages.
No attempts at communication.
Some things were safer left unexamined. Generations passed.
Humanity never returned to what it had been. There were no empires.
No flags. No unified voice. Only communities. Small. Independent. Quiet. They remembered. Children were taught history without heroes.
They learned about decoy worlds that died screaming so others could escape.
About choices made without applause. About survival that tasted like ash.
They learned that winning does not feel like victory. The galaxy slowly began to notice something strange.
Whenever conflict escalated too far, whenever extinction became likely, human ships appeared. Unmarked. Silent. Effective. They did not stay. Humanity became a pattern, not a presence. Some species tried to find them. They failed. Others stopped trying. The Council rebuilt itself. It passed laws about war, about containment, about ethical engagement. Humanity never attended. Their absence was louder than any vote. Then one day, a signal emerged. Not from the null. From deep space. Something older. Something that had been watching both humanity and the null. Something that had learned. Human detection systems activated instantly. Not because of threat. Because of familiarity. The signal carried a single concept. Acknowledgement. Human analysts understood. The universe had noticed. Not their strength. Their restraint. Humanity did not respond. They never did anymore. They prepared.
Somewhere in the dark the null remained still.
Perhaps thinking. Perhaps remembering. Perhaps waiting. Humanity continued living. Not as rulers. Not as saviors. But as witnesses. And if the universe ever forgot what choice looked like, humanity would remind it. Quietly.
They were never meant to be seen.
Only to remain. The end.